I was never one for late-night grocery runs, but that Thursday was different. The storm had knocked the power out at home, and with my freezer threatening to turn into a swamp of melted disaster, I figured Walmart, open 24/7, was my best bet. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, the place was almost empty. Just a few cars scattered across the massive asphalt field, their rain-slicked exteriors glinting under the flickering streetlights. It was eerie how quiet it was. The storm had calmed to a drizzle, but the usual hum of life around Walmart seemed muted, almost like the world had been placed on pause. The automatic doors groaned as they slid open, and a wave of cold, sterile air hit me. I grabbed a cart, its wheel squeaking obnoxiously loud in the silence, and started weaving through the aisles. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Not wrong exactly, but not normal either. Halfway through the frozen foods section, I noticed it. A figure, standing perfectly still at the far end of the aisle. They were dressed in all black, with their hood pulled up so I couldn't see their face. They weren't shopping, weren't moving, just standing there, watching me. "Hey!" I called out, forcing a nervous laugh. "You okay over there?" No response. The figure tilted its head slightly, like it was curious. My gut told me to turn around and leave right then and there, but logic kicked in. This was Walmart, not some abandoned horror movie gas station. It was probably just some weird teenager messing around. I turned back to grab a bag of frozen peas, and when I looked up again, they were gone. A chill ran down my spine. I wheeled my cart toward the registers, suddenly very aware of how alone I was. The sound of the squeaky wheel seemed deafening now, echoing through the vast, empty store. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. Just rows of neatly stocked shelves, stretching endlessly under the pale light. But then I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate just a few aisles away. I froze, gripping the cart so tightly my knuckles turned white. The footsteps weren't hurried, weren't frantic. They were calculated, steady, and they were getting closer. I tried to convince myself it was just another late-night shopper, but the rational part of my brain wasn't buying it. I ducked down the next aisle, abandoning my cart entirely, and peered around the corner. Nothing. No one. Just the soft hum of refrigerators and the endless rows of merchandise. "Calm down," I whispered to myself. "You're being paranoid." Then the footsteps stopped. It was silent now, eerily so, as if the entire store had gone into some sort of suspended animation. Even the buzzing of the overhead lights seemed to fade. I took a shaky step forward, scanning the aisles, but the place was as empty as when I'd first arrived. I was about to chalk it up to my imagination when something made my skin crawl. A sound. Not footsteps this time, but a slow, deliberate tapping, like nails or fingers drumming on glass. It was coming from the freezer aisle. I turned the corner, my heart hammering in my chest, and saw it. One of the freezer doors was cracked open. Just slightly. It wasn't the tapping that made my stomach drop, though. It was the foggy, hand-shaped prints smeared across the inside of the glass. Small prints, child-sized. There was no way those prints had been there earlier. I was certain of it. I stepped closer, the fluorescent lights above flickering as if they were struggling to stay on, and peered into the freezer. Nothing. Just rows of neatly stacked frozen pizzas. But as I turned away, something caught my eye. A faint outline, barely visible in the frosted glass. A face, pale and featureless, staring back at me from inside the freezer. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over myself, and slammed into the opposite shelf. The clang echoed through the aisle, and the face disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. My breathing was ragged, and I could feel the sweat starting to bead on my forehead. And then, from somewhere deeper in the store, I heard a voice. A child's voice. It was soft, almost melodic, but the words sent a shiver through me. "Help me?" I turned toward the sound, my mind racing. It didn't make sense. There were no kids here. There shouldn't be. But the voice came again, this time more insistent. "Help me, please." Against every instinct screaming at me to leave, I started walking toward the sound. My steps were slow, hesitant, But the voice continued, pulling me deeper into the labyrinth of aisles. It led me past the toys, past the home goods section, and finally to the farthest corner of the store, the garden center. The air felt different back here. Heavier, colder. The automatic doors leading to the outdoor garden area were locked. But beyond the glass, the rain had stopped. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an otherworldly glow over the rows of plants and gardening tools. "Hello," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Is someone there?" No answer, just the faint rustle of leaves outside, swaying gently in the wind. And then I saw it, a shadow moving between the racks of potted plants. It was small, barely reaching my waist, and quick, darting out of sight as soon as I noticed it. I pressed my hand against the glass, trying to get a better look. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The shadow stopped. Slowly, it turned toward me. I couldn't see its features, but I could feel it watching me, the weight of its gaze pressing down on my chest like a physical force. And then it stepped closer out of the shadows. It wasn't a child. It stood just beyond the glass, illuminated by the pale glow of the moon. At first glance, it might have passed for a child, but the proportions were off. Its limbs were too long, its torso too thin, and its head tilted unnaturally to one side, as if it couldn't quite hold it upright. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes, large and black like polished obsidian, seemed to swallow the light. My breath caught in my throat. It didn't move for a long moment, just stood there, staring at me. Then, slowly, its mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural smile, revealing rows of needle-thin teeth. It raised one hand, long, claw-like fingers curling against the glass, and tapped. Tap, tap, tap. I stumbled back, nearly falling over. What the hell? Before I could finish the thought, the lights in the garden center flickered and went out completely. I was plunged into darkness, save for the faint moonlight seeping through the glass doors. My pulse thundered in my ears as I scrambled to pull my phone from my pocket, fumbling with the flashlight. When the beam of light cut through the darkness, the thing was gone. I scanned the garden center, my hands trembling so badly the light danced erratically across the plants and shelves. It wasn't outside anymore. It was inside. The rustling sound came again, this time from behind me. I spun around, the flashlight landing on a rack of shovels and rakes. For a moment, I saw nothing. Then one of the tools shifted, clattering to the floor. My flashlight's beam caught a glimpse of movement, a flash of pale skin disappearing around the corner. "Stay away from me," I shouted, backing toward the main store. My voice echoed through the empty space, but I doubted anyone could hear me. Who would even be here at this hour? The sound of footsteps, quick and light, like bare feet on tile, grew louder. It was circling me, darting between the aisles, staying just out of sight. I bolted, sprinting toward the main part of the store, my shoes squeaking against the floor. The doors to the garden center were just ahead, and then they slammed shut. I skidded to a stop, my heart sinking as I tried the handle. Locked. Panic surged through me, and I spun around, pressing my back against the door. My flashlight flickered, the beam struggling to stay alive, and I saw it again. Standing at the end of the aisle, its head tilted and its smile impossibly wide. "You can't leave," it said, its voice high-pitched and childlike, but with an undercurrent of something darker, something ancient. "Not yet." It started walking toward me, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette controlled by an unskilled puppeteer. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slipping as I tried to dial 911, but the screen wouldn't respond. The signal was gone. "Stay back," I yelled, grabbing a metal rake from a nearby shelf and holding it out like a weapon. The thing didn't stop. It was close now, close enough that I could see the way its skin seemed to ripple and shift, as though something was writhing beneath the surface. When it was just a few feet away, it stopped. Its head snapped to the side, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. And then it whispered, "They're coming." Before I could process what it meant, the entire store went dark. Not just the garden center, all of Walmart. The faint hum of electricity that I'd grown so accustomed to was gone. replaced by an oppressive, suffocating silence. My flashlight flickered one last time and died, plunging me into complete blackness. That's when I heard them. Footsteps, dozens of them, echoing through the aisles, coming from all directions. The footsteps were chaotic, overlapping, some fast and skittering, others slow and deliberate. I pressed myself against the door, my chest heaving as I tried to force air into my lungs. It felt like the darkness was alive, wrapping itself around me, squeezing tighter with every passing second. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel them. They were close, too close. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "Stay back." A burst of cold air swept past me, carrying with it a faint metallic scent, like rust or blood. My hands groped at the door behind me, desperate for any way to escape. The footsteps stopped abruptly, and for a few seconds the silence was almost worse. And then came the whispers. They weren't in English or any language I recognized. They overlapped, layered on top of one another like a choir of voices speaking in tongues. Some were high-pitched, almost childlike, while others were guttural, distorted, inhuman. They seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere, drilling into my skull and making my vision swim. I dropped the rake, clutching at my ears in a futile attempt to block out the sound. "Stop it!" I screamed. "Please just stop." The whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, more insistent, until they were all I could hear. I sank to my knees, the cold tile pressing against my legs, and squeezed my eyes shut. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But then I felt it. A hand, ice cold and clawed, wrapping around my ankle. I kicked out instinctively, my foot connecting with something solid. A guttural hiss echoed through the darkness, followed by the sound of something skittering away. My hand shot out, grabbing the rake I'd dropped, and I swung it wildly in front of me, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "Leave me alone," I yelled. "I don't know what you want, but leave me alone." A soft laugh echoed through the darkness. Not a warm laugh, but something cold, mocking, devoid of any humanity. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice said. It was the same childlike tone I'd heard earlier, but now it was joined by others, layers of voices speaking in unison. "You saw too much." The temperature in the room plummeted, and my breath came out in visible puffs. I tightened my grip on the rake, trying to steady my trembling hands. "I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered. "I didn't see anything." The laugh came again, louder this time. "Liar." A faint light flickered to life, casting the garden center in a sickly green glow. It wasn't coming from the overhead lights, though. It was coming from them. They were everywhere. Dozens of figures stood among the aisles and shelves, their forms barely human. Some were tall and gangly, their limbs bending in unnatural ways, while others were small and hunched, with glowing eyes that pierced through the darkness. Their skin was mottled and pale, their faces twisted into grotesque expressions of hunger and malice. And at the center of it all was the thing from before, the pale, childlike figure with the too wide smile. It stood motionless, its black eyes fixed on me, but the others, they were moving, slowly, deliberately, closing the distance between us. "Join us," the child thing said, its voice echoing with the weight of something ancient. "We'll make it quick." I swung the rake in front of me, the metal clanging against the tile as I backed away. "Stay back," I shouted. "I'm not going anywhere with you." The figures didn't stop. Their movements were slow, almost casual, but there was no mistaking their intent. They were toying with me, savoring the chase. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on an emergency exit sign glowing faintly in the corner. It was my only chance. Without thinking, I bolted, the rake clattering to the ground as I sprinted toward the door. The figures let out a collective shriek, the sound high-pitched and unnatural, and the air behind me exploded with movement as they gave chase. My legs burned as I sprinted toward the glowing red exit sign, every instinct screaming at me to move faster. The air was thick with the sound of their pursuit, scraping, skittering, and that unnatural, shrill wailing that seemed to dig straight into my brain. I didn't dare look back. The emergency door loomed ahead, tantalizingly close. I could almost feel the cold metal of the push bar against my palms. Just a few more steps. Then the ground shifted beneath me. Something wrapped around my ankle. A claw, a hand, I didn't know. And I went down hard. The air knocked from my lungs as I hit the cold tile. Pain shot up my leg, but there was no time to register it. They were on me. I twisted onto my back, kicking out wildly, and saw them closing in. Pale, twisted faces with gaping mouths and black, soulless eyes. Their hands reached for me, long fingers ending in jagged claws. I lashed out with my foot, connecting with one of their faces, and scrambled to my feet. The door. Focus on the door. I limped the last few steps, my hand slamming against the push bar. The alarm screeched as the door burst open, spilling me out into the freezing night air. I stumbled into the parking lot, the cold rain stinging my skin as I fought to stay upright. But they didn't stop. The figures spilled out of the store behind me, their movements faster now, more frantic. Their inhuman cries filled the air, echoing off the rows of parked cars. I scanned the lot, my eyes landing on my car parked under a flickering streetlight. My keys were in my pocket, thank God, but the distance between me and the car felt impossibly long. Still, it was my only shot. I ran. The rain slicked the asphalt beneath me, and my injured leg screamed in protest, but I didn't stop. I could hear them closing the gap, their footsteps slapping against the wet pavement, their shrieks growing louder. My hands shook as I yanked my keys from my pocket, fumbling to hit the unlock button. The car's lights blinked, the locks clicking open. I threw myself inside, slamming the door shut and jamming the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life just as something slammed against the driver's side window. The childlike figure. Its face was inches from mine, its black eyes boring into me, its mouth stretched into that same grotesque smile. "You can't leave," it hissed, its breath fogging the glass. "You belong to us now." I didn't wait. I threw the car into reverse, the tires screeching as I tore out of the parking space. The figure clung to the window, its claws scraping against the glass, but I didn't stop. I swung the car around, slamming on the gas, and the figure finally let go, tumbling to the ground. The other figures were swarming now, spilling into the parking lot like a flood of shadows. I barreled through them, the car bouncing as it rolled over something solid, and sped toward the exit. My hands were slick on the wheel, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I turned onto the main road. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away, the Walmart long behind me. Only then did I pull over, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from my chest. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the rain streaking down the windshield, trying to convince myself it was over, that I was safe. But when I finally glanced into the rearview mirror, my stomach dropped. In the back seat, barely visible in the dim light, was the pale, childlike figure. His black eyes met mine and it smiled. "You can never leave," it whispered. I didn't even have time to scream. My body locked up as if every muscle had been hit with a jolt of electricity. The figure leaned forward, its pale, featureless face inches from mine, those black eyes drilling into my soul. Its voice came again, soft and venomous, like a predator toying with its prey. "You left them behind," it whispered. "But you didn't leave me." Adrenaline kicked in, and I twisted in my seat, lashing out with my fist, but it didn't connect with anything. The figure was gone. The back seat was empty. My breathing was ragged, my chest heaving as I whipped my head around, scanning every corner of the car. Nothing, just shadows dancing across the seats, cast by the occasional headlights of passing cars. I threw the car into drive, my tires screeching against the wet pavement as I bolted down the road. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip the wheel, but I didn't care. I needed to put as much distance between me and that Walmart as humanly possible. But the further I drove, the stranger things became. The world outside my windows didn't look right. The rain, which had been a light drizzle, was now falling in thick, sluggish drops that splattered against the windshield like tar. The streetlights were fewer and farther between, their glow dim and sickly. And the road didn't seem to end. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 3:12 a.m. The same time it had been when I left the parking lot. My stomach churned as I glanced at my phone, but the screen was dead. Not even the emergency SOS function would respond. This isn't real, I muttered to myself, my voice shaking. This can't be real. But the radio disagreed. The static hissed to life, filling the car with a low, droning hum that vibrated deep in my chest. Then, through the static, a voice emerged. Turn back. My grip tightened on the wheel, and I shook my head, as if the voice could see me. No, I'm not going back there. Turn back. It repeated, louder this time, almost a growl. The car shuddered, the engine sputtering as if it were on the verge of stalling. I slammed my foot on the gas, but the car barely responded, creeping forward at a crawl no matter how hard I pressed the pedal. The voice on the radio laughed, a deep, guttural sound that sent ice coursing through my veins. You can't run from it, it said. You never could. I didn't know what it meant, but I didn't care. My only thought was to get out, to escape this endless stretch of road that seemed to twist and turn in impossible ways. I wrenched the wheel to the side, veering onto what looked like a side street, and the car suddenly surged forward, the engine roaring back to life. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The headlights illuminated a shape in the middle of the road. It was standing there, waiting for me, the childlike figure, its pale skin glowing faintly in the darkness, its black eyes reflecting the light. It raised one hand, as if beckoning me forward. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop just feet from the figure. My heart hammered in my chest as it tilted its head, watching me with that too-wide smile. Why are you running? It asked, its voice soft, almost playful. We've already claimed you. No! I screamed, throwing the car into reverse. But as I looked in the rearview mirror, my blood ran cold. The road behind me was gone. In its place was darkness, an infinite, suffocating void that seemed to stretch on forever. I was trapped. The figure took a step closer, its movements slow and deliberate, savoring my fear. There's no escape, it said. There never was. My mind raced, desperation clawing at me. I wasn't going to let it win. Not like this. My eyes darted to the passenger seat, where the rake from Walmart now inexplicably sat. I didn't question how it got there. I grabbed it, throwing the car door open and stepping out into the freezing rain. Stay back, I shouted, brandishing the rake like a weapon. The figure's smile widened. You think you can fight us? It took another step forward, and then another, until it was close enough that I could feel the cold radiating off its body. My grip on the rake tightened, and with every ounce of strength I had, I swung it at the figure's head. The rake passed through it like smoke. Before I could react, its clawed hand shot out, gripping my wrist with an icy, iron-like strength. My vision blurred as pain shot up my arm, and I dropped the rake, falling to my knees. Submit, it whispered, leaning in close. It's easier that way. But then, from the darkness, a sound cut through the air. A blaring horn, loud and jarring. The figure recoiled, hissing like a wounded animal. I turned to see headlights barreling toward us, a semi-truck roaring down the road at impossible speed. I didn't have time to think. I threw myself to the side as the truck plowed through the figure, its horn blaring as it disappeared into the void. When I looked up, the road was empty. The figure was gone, and the world was normal again. The rain was just rain. The streetlights glowed steady, and behind me in the distance was Walmart, quiet and unassuming. I didn't stop driving until the sun rose. I drove until the sun broke the horizon, its golden light spilling across the landscape like a lifeline. I pulled into a rest stop off the highway, my body trembling as the adrenaline finally bled out of me. My hands were numb, still gripping the wheel like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a couple of trucks parked along the far edge. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at the rising sun, trying to convince myself that I was safe now, that whatever nightmare I'd stumbled into had been left behind on that dark stretch of road. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. I stepped out of the car, my legs unsteady beneath me, and headed for the rest stop's bathroom. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed faintly, casting harsh shadows across the cracked tiles. I splashed cold water on my face, hoping to shake off the lingering fear, but when I looked up into the mirror, my heart stopped. For a split second, I saw it. The childlike figure, standing just behind me, its black eyes locked onto mine. I spun around, but the bathroom was empty. Just the sound of dripping water and the faint hum of the lights. "Get a grip," I muttered, clutching the edge of the sink. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, the feeling of being watched refused to leave me. I hurried back to my car, locking the doors the moment I climbed inside. The rest stop seemed quiet, ordinary, but I couldn't shake the sensation that something was wrong. I pulled out my phone, hoping to check the time, but it was still dead. No signal, no battery, nothing. That's when I noticed the message. It was scrawled across the fogged-up windshield in shaky, childlike handwriting. For words that made my blood run cold. "You can't escape us." I stared at the message, my mind racing. My fingers hovered over the ignition, every nerve in my body screaming at me to drive, to get as far away from this place as possible. But before I could start the car, something caught my eye in the rearview mirror. A shadow moved in the back seat. I turned slowly, my breath hitching in my throat. First, I saw nothing, just the empty seats, bathed in the pale morning light. But then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A small, pale hand sliding out from beneath the passenger seat. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, no, no." The hand gripped the edge of the seat, followed by another, and then the thing began to pull itself up. Its black eyes met mine, its mouth stretching into that horrible, impossible smile. "You'll never be free," it said, its voice a chorus of whispers, layered and inhuman. I threw the door open and stumbled out of the car, my legs barely cooperating as I ran. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from the car, from the thing, from everything. My footsteps echoed against the pavement, my breath ragged and shallow. Behind me, I heard it laugh. That cold, mocking laugh, carrying on the wind like a predator toying with its prey. I didn't stop running until I reached the highway. Cars zipped past me, their drivers oblivious to the terror clawing at my chest. I flagged down a trucker, a burly man with kind eyes, who let me climb into the cab without asking too many questions. I didn't tell him much, just that my car had broken down and I needed to get away from here. He dropped me off at a small diner a few towns over, and I sat there for hours, nursing a cup of coffee and trying to make sense of what had happened. But no matter how much I replayed it in my mind, I couldn't find an explanation. By the time I worked up the nerve to call someone, the car was gone. The lot where I'd left it was empty, like it had never been there at all. I haven't been back to Walmart since. I don't go out late at night, and I sure as hell don't drive down unfamiliar roads. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I catch glimpses of movement in the corner of my eye, or hear faint whispers, just on the edge of hearing. And at night, in the moments before sleep takes me, I see it. Those black eyes, that smile, waiting, because they're right. You can't escape them.